on what he's talking about
Yeah,
right now,
but
so
don't
carry that
junipers-
further.
Don't junipers have relatively direct lines from root to branch?
Absolutely, but
So which one is that feeding? Are you
I'm
concerned?
not concerned in the least bit.
And that
It's
being
A,
because?
because it's a young tree and it's
Okay.
more sharing resources right now.
Okay,
And B, because there's just so many roots here that taking that away, it'll fill in. That line
okay, well
will
then
fill
that
in.
kind of goes against them having that direct relationship
Being
between root
specific.
and branch. But you said on a younger tree, it shares more research,
It
more
does.
resources. So as a tree ages, do those resources between, or does that separation become more pronounced from root to branch?
I would say absolutely, and to the point where you could actually see the swelling and be able to trace the lines of root to branch.
Or see the dead branch after you've killed that root?
The recession of that section. Yep,
Eventually.
Yep,
But you're not concerned with that here?
not at all.
What about, so strength is in the foliage in the juniper, so you got a ton of.
Which is,
foliage,
yeah.
So probably okay, would it be any different if that was a pine tree and the strength is in the roots in a pine?
I would absolutely have to assess the root system of that tree and make a judgment call then. You know what I mean? If I had a root system like this on a pine tree, I wouldn't have any problem with it. I mean, strengthen the roots, I wouldn't have any issues with it at all.
So the reason I asked my question too is that's a fairly substantial root.
Sure.
And that's why, so you're
But
not
that is
concerned.
one feeder root of, I mean, look
yeah,
at
yeah.
the surface area.
But you're not concerned about that one root feeding one branch that you might be afraid to lose?
Nope, it'll
Okay.
compartmentalize. And what I'll do is I'll remove it and,
Now watch, he's just gonna take that right
Because
off.
all the foliage is blocking. You'll remove it.
I'm gonna remove it there. I'm gonna go down. I'm not gonna worry about,
Watch a branch fall off.
Now, if that were a nursery pot, it's dead. And that nursery pot, that tree was in a 5-gallon nursery pot, and that, you have no idea how, those are
yeah.
not fine roots, those are big roots. So in that case, if you cut off a big one like that, your scenario is absolutely accurate. You could lose a whole side or whatever branch of that tree. But this tree has so many fine roots that it's gonna recover totally.
Each group of fine roots is coming off of one, fatter root above, barry surface roots. That's what's giving all the fine roots. So that's why, just my understanding of junipers and that one-way traffic, or not one-way traffic, but connected traffic, one root to one branch.
Right, but if there are 5 roots that are pretty big and you cut one of those,
Right.
that applies. Here, there are 1,000 fine roots that are all coming out of the sheen of this tree, which developed over the previous 5 years.
Right.
So you could basically saw this tree around the end, leaving a little bit in the middle.
That-
And this tree,
Right, that I get, You can reduce all the, because then you're not removing anything from
no,
the source.
but I mean, there are so many fine roots coming out of the sheen on this tree that one root doesn't have like 80% of one particular branch coming from it, because there are so many tiny roots.
Right, but all coming off different parts, and that's what I'm just, is there or is there not that connection that I've always heard there was in junipers root to a branch?
Not when you have a solid root ball like that. And that's the difference. Right, Brian?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to have followed that root line up into the branch it feeds,
I would guarantee
branch
that
would
is
still
not,
be safe.
there's more roots feeding that branch than just that root.
That vein is
Okay,
being
well, then
fed
that's-
more
then
than
that's-
just that one
then
root.
that's the part that I was maybe a little confused about. So it's not
Right.
as
Well, if you-
direct of a connection
Well, okay, so
from
just count
one
them.
root to one branch.
How many
even
roots are
like
coming
that.
out, even main roots are coming out of this in conjunction to branches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, there's a handful of branches here, and there's way more count of roots. So there's multiple roots feeding branches.
Okay, then it's not as black and white.
No.
It's like if you listen to Colin Lewis talk, Colin Lewis says it's a one-way. You cut this root, you're gonna lose that branch.
No.
Yeah, all right.
But if you look now that I've removed that root, I think it's an improvement from the.
Oh, yeah, that was never, that was not a question.
When you repot, are you going to raise it up to expose those, or are you going to leave it down in the soil so that they continue to grow at a faster rate?
Nope, I think they're adequate now in size, that they match the tree. I'm gonna probably show, the nabari out to about here.
And you left a little nub
That's what I was gonna ask
of what you
next.
cut
Would you-
off?
I can doctor that up later. You know, I'm just worried about, I cut it, I masked it from the ground. I'm not worried about digging out the roots that it was feeding. That can just decompose in the soil and feed the tree. That would be more harmful to this tree when you have a solid root ball than.
I don't know if you left it up on purpose for now and are taking it back later, or if you could take it back right away if you felt like
I
it.
could, just in the interest of time, I'm gonna keep repotting. So as you look, there's also this dome shape to my surface work that I did on the tree. That allows me to raise it up, hit my soil line right about where I want to, and then this will still be under the soil line, you know, this end lip. So I'm going around and I wanna take off the edges and the bottom.
Now, if this were a beech tree or a Korean hornbeam in a nursery pot, it wouldn't be being this rough. This is a willow. If this were an elm, I could be this rough. What else?
Probably maple.
Maple, you could probably be this rough.
Yeah.
Ginkgo.
Ginkgo, you could be this rough. Absolutely.
Now, another thing I want to say is, as we're looking at the roots that Steve got, a lot of this root ball was set up very early on, because I never would have been able to get it in a smaller pot with a substantial amount of feeder roots. If I cut my roots back to this far and started acquiring the fine feeder roots way out here, I'd never have it in the pot that I have it in. So it was initial root work that allowed me to get this root ball to keep it in a small pot. So the work that Steve is doing now is absolutely paramount to setting the table to have a successful bonsai tree. This first repot is just, I can't emphasize how important that is.
I'm surprised at the amount of fine roots coming out of that.
It's a willow.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a vigorous growing tree.
But what I'm saying is they're fine. They're not, I don't see a bunch of fat ones.
They're fine. Yes, they are. They're fine. Right now, these roots, I don't know if you can see this, but these are the surface roots, and I still have trunk way down here. So I have a choice. I either cut this bottom off, or I cut all these off. What are the choice?
So you could have used the saw.
So I could have on this one now that I'm seeing it, yes.
We can't use hindsight. We're not allowed to use hindsight
bring us
because we don't
some?
have it.
What's that?
Did you bring us
I'd be
some?
on my bandsaw. That works really good.
Sure.
Smaller
Here's
than
one
the
small,
saw I brought? Thank you.
Cutting off a
Is that
bottle.
the silky pocket boy?
No. No. Never mind.
The stoic
Only
Peter,
you know
the
where.
stoic Peter T.
Do you have to put root hormone on the end of that, Steve?
No, no.
Because it's a willow, or
I would not put root hormone on it at all, even if it was a beech or a hornbeam. So if I put this in a deep pot, I'm never going to create nabari where I want to create nabari. These roots are going to grow out, especially in that box, and that flare is going to be huge in a year, especially because it's a willow, but in a few years if it were a maple. And I'm going to take more of that off. Because I don't want those roots to take over, I want these roots to take over.
So as you're pruning there, Brian, on the sides, are you looking to get like, what, like within like maybe a half inch of the size of, I mean, a quarter inch, half inch of the sides of the,
Yeah.
from the sides of the pot?
Take the container and I will actually start seeing where we're at. So I can still get some more,
roots do you think you took off that?
more room around.
3/4?
Pardon me?
3/4 of the roots came off?
I would say
say
more
90%.
like 80% of that.
Maybe a little bit.
Which is
Or 90.
5% more than your guess.
Yes, I know. Exactly right. Yeah.
So if I were at home, I would have this in water and I would wash everything off. I would not do that if this was a beech, if this was a tree of a different kind of tree. This is a willows. I'd wash everything off. It's a
Why?
deciduous tree because I, right now, will start to create the sheen on this tree today.
What's the definition of sheen?
Sheen is the heartbeat of the plant. So the heartbeat of the plant is what Brian has developed on that tree. So what he's doing is removing a half an inch all around that circular part of that plant, maybe a little bit off the bottom. He's going to put a tiny amount of fresh bonsai soil in there, and that's done because he hasn't touched the heartbeat. That tree is not going to have an issue for a second.
So the sheen is the general shape of the root ball?
The sheen is the fine root growth that comes right out of the base that never, ever, ever is touched once it's created.
Oh, okay.
It's always left there. This has no sheen. But because it's deciduous, because it's willow, it's going to create those fine roots from today if I have good soil right there.
But I thought in our class, we talked about if you washed it in water, you destroy the rhizomes. Or
If I wash it in water, I basically take off all of the bacteria that are native to it.
Okay.
Little bit of
And if this were anything other than a willow, I would likely not do that.
Okay,
But because it's a willow, and because I've gotten pretty good at repopulating that soil with his direction, with bacteria, I'm not as concerned.
Okay, okay.
The trick is going to be holding this in the pot.
So I think that I've done an adequate,
And you're going right back in the same pot.
I'm going right back into the same pot. It's like this pot, I've got room around the root ball.
You can't see that.
Sorry, it's hard.
It's all, I know, it's all foliage for us.
Yeah, but if you guys want to come up and look, I mean, I've got enough room for new roots to grow all the way around and on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray this down again, just lightly.
That's just water?
This is just water. This is dechlorinated water.
Dechlorinated water. What the heck is dechlorinated water?
Our city water, yeah, our city water has been treated with chlorine. You can smell it, you can taste it, whatever else. Why do they put chlorine in our water?
Kill the bacteria.
What do we want to have
Bacteria.
our plants to thrive and survive?
Bacteria.
We want to take the chlorine out of our water.
So you just let it sit for 12 hours
Yeah,
or
this has
something?
just been aerated. Yeah, I just leave it out in a bucket or whatever and let it aerate. I put a little air stone in there, bubble it up, and in a couple of hours it's dechlorinated.
What kind of stone?
Like an air stone, an aquarium air stone, with an air pump.
Okay.
You know,
Oh,
and I just bubble it. You know.
Okay.
The
So,
bubbles.
and for folks that, you know, like if you have indoor trees,
get rid of this, right?
Yep.
don't fill up your watering can right before you water, fill it up when you're done
just gonna
watering.
set it on the
Then when
side.
you go to water, it's been sitting.
Yeah, you don't have to dechlorate.
Right, and I don't know if this is good or not, but I have a couple copper watering pots. I put hot water in my copper water pots to try and leach some of that copper out until I water next time. Watch leach some of the copper into the water.
Oh yeah, why not?
Well, I'm trying to think, okay, why copper? Why copper? Why copper? Well, there's gotta be a reason they always use copper watering pots in Japan or wherever. Well, because they're pretty, but copper in our water is a natural, antifungal,
Copper, yeah, it's also a trace.
yeah, trace element. Good, there's just good stuff in copper to a certain extent.
pretty fancy box with the box corners there.
What is what? The class, the build one? Well, I put
How do you feel? about
9:30 at night last night. When I realized if I put
I know
it in
people
this
that do
pot,
that.
it would fall apart before the end of the summer. I just put this around it to kind of hold it and to set it off the ground so it doesn't. But I just look for garbage piles. It's hard to pass a garbage pile without stopping. You just never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah, those are used. Fish are-
They are not, yeah, they're really.
That's really just never would get it
I know what you're
fine on
talking
the end, is that
about.
it?
No.
Working hard to get the
To
line
find this would
from
start
box to
at the point of
I didn't have a, I
So
didn't.
you cut it, if you cut those big thick roots this far out, the fine feeder roots are gonna grow up. Now when you try to go put it in a bonsai pot, you gotta go back and start that.
I'd have thought I'd have been there by this age. No, I'm not.
Because I saw somewhere on some website where there was a big tree like this big, and they went in on the outside after they did what you did, and they started cutting.
Well, no, I have to.
Triangle shape.
So Steve, would you consider screwing that into the bottom of the pot?
I mean, you don't need it there, you don't have enough.
Driving a screw up to the bottom for something like that?
Could. Kevin just asked a really good question. So on a tree like this, where I've cut this off, he asked me, would I consider screwing a screw right into the bottom of this tree? And yes, I have done that. I have put that at the bottom of a pot and put a drywall screw right up into it. Yes, I have
Ain't
done.
going anywhere then.
I'm not doing that here because I want to show another technique. And it's a pretty small trunk. I mean, I've done that with trunks that are maybe like that. But you could do it with something like
How
that.
far would you
Just hold
go
in
into
place?
it then? Without, so it doesn't split it?
Oh, I don't know, maybe a little.
Just enough to
half
catch
inch.
it then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wet wood, so it's not gonna split.
Depends on the size of the trunk. You don't want to mess it up too badly. Split
You
it
don't
or
have to worry
anything,
about
I'm guessing.
spackling then afterwards.
Yeah. So Brian is setting up his pot. So I'm going to talk about drainage layer, okay, or aeration layer.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is Aoki soil. This is all used bonsai soil. Every year when I repot, I take all the soil that was in the plant that came off of it, which we will be doing with that, not mine, but Brian's, and put it in a bucket. I let it sit out in the hot sun in summer so it kind of bakes. I sift it in fall, I divide it into 3 sizes, and this is used soil. There's nothing wrong with this soil. There's nothing wrong, no reason that you can't reuse it. I wouldn't put my very best tree, although why wouldn't I? I don't really know why I wouldn't. You could use this for any tree. I would tend to use this for something I need to put in a box. I have a lot of students that like want to get into using good akadama at a little lower rate, like I sell a lot of it to this guy. And so this is just there's 3 components, lava, pumice, and akadama. So this is what my teacher Ryan Neal calls an aeration layer. It's the same soil that I'm using for my fill, but it's the largest particle size, and it just helps that bottom layer where the water is going to sit. Even though you saw how many holes I had in this box, there's still going to be that much water that sits at the bottom of this pot. And I drilled those holes to the end because most of my pots on my bench are tipped, and they're tipped to help drainage. Because what keeps any of our bonsai healthy is a good balance of water and oxygen. You've got to have oxygen in this mix for this to create good, healthy roots. So my teacher Ryan says this has to be 1 particle size thick. We're all a little OCD.
No, some of us are.
Some of us are. Yeah, I am for sure. So I'd add 4 or 6 more particles to this. If I were at home and nobody would see me. Here I'm going to relax. I would.
You would.
Here I'm going to relax.
Okay, Andrew. You like this painting?
So this is the same soil that's there, but the proportions are different. So out of the bag, the soil looks closer to this. 80% agadama, 20% pumice and lava. I've added a lot of pumice and lava to this to dry this mix out to create a high level of oxygen to water. I want a lot of oxygen, not that much water, because I want this tree to go looking for water, looking for nutrients, so I want it to have a lot of air. So I call this, I'd say I dried this soil out a little. I really didn't, because pumice is the water holding capacity of the mix. These little pumice particles are tiny, tiny, tiny particles. They hold a lot of water.
Sponge.
Lava is got bigger little holes in the particle. This is the air holding, the oxygen holding component. Akadama is the nutrient holding component of the soil. So of the mix that Boone, Kathy Shaner, Ryan Neal, most of the professionals